There's Authentic Entrepreneurial Masterclass, there's Impetus, there's some consulting, and there's some sort of fairly high-level work with corporates and companies in the sort of deal-making space. What's your formula for making it all happen? I mean, it could potentially be, I'd imagine, very overwhelming, difficult to stay on top of so many things, projects, people, demands, and I'd imagine that's a very similar story for many entrepreneurs. How is that for you?
Yeah, look, it often comes up, and I remember when I was starting out, how it was very, it was very overwhelming, and it's interesting because overwhelm really is just a product of choosing to have too much adventure and challenge and opportunity on your plate and just trying to segment it and get it in the right order. So it happens to all walks of life. I mean, yeah, of course, I wouldn't say there's any entrepreneur who doesn't at some point have an aspect of overwhelm or a need to try and manage things in an orderly way, in a calm way. Yeah, certainly there's a big portfolio there. So, well, the challenge with all of that is that it's all well and good keeping an eye on your clients, but clients compete with you on strategy, on structure, on managing your business.
Yeah, right.
And so you have to, step one is making sure your clients are lit up and accelerated, because that fires you up as well. It's a reflected glory. But then secondarily, making sure you allocate enough time to work on the business and to be strategic. And a lot of people just don't do this. They get sucked into client work because that's where the money is. It's such an overused phrase, work on the business and not in the business. But in reality, if you actually decide that working on the business is great fun. I mean, if you jump in a car and you don't actually know where you're going, you're never going to get there. You actually have to take time out and work out, where do we want to go, what's the who are the avatars we want to work with, who we're going to target with our business, how are we not going to beat ourselves up with perfection. And I think the biggest thing of all is actually patience. Having some patience that actually this is a journey in 5 or 10 years. It's not a journey for 1 year. And to be kind to yourself along the way. And even though I said that's the biggest thing, there was actually one thing bigger than that.
What's that?
And that's to feel good. It's actually to feel good. And so many entrepreneurs are working. They're working long hours. They're looking at the white at the end of their fingers and realize they've worked them to the bone. And they're forgetting actually they've got to feel good, because when you feel good, you put out a great energy. People want to work with you. People are excited with you. They want to. Suddenly, you've got an inspired team. You don't get worn out so easily. So finding the enjoyment in what you're doing, rather than chasing a destination, I think is really the number one thing in a business.
When you started out, because you were in corporate, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And for a fairly long time.
Uh-huh.
When you made the move, what were the challenges? What was the sort of right in front of you at the beginning? Just whoa, there must that transition phase, that thing that often I think probably puts a lot of people off making the move, because there is a fantastic support network wrapping them up and keeping them safe.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
corporate. And what was that like for you when you made that move?
Oh, look, I was so full of uninformed optimism. I had no idea. I was so optimistic and bullish because you come off a big corporate career, you've got a massive brand around you, you've got a finance team, you've got a marketing team, you've got you've got systems in place. You have no idea how solid these systems are, how they keep you moving. Yeah. You've got velocity, momentum, you've got reputation, and you've probably got some form of capital behind you as well. Your decision making is limited to the modality that lights you up, or whatever it is. You might be in marketing, or you might be in product design, or you might be, in risk evaluation, or whatever department you happen to be in corporate. And so not only does this enormous thing hit you, which is how to run a business, which you're completely unprepared for. You then have this other enormous thing that hits you, which is Am I ready for it? What about my personal development? What about my fortitude, and what about my decision making, and what about my business skills, and what am I lit up by, and what am I actually going to do?
So was there kind of like a moment where after the, as you called it, bullish optimism, was there a moment where it's sort of, however long it was into the process, you suddenly went, oh, fuck.
Well, yeah, exactly, because so many people leave. Tell me about it. I'll tell you exactly. So many corporates, people in corporates, leave corporate with a buffer, and it's like a poison chalice, because on one hand you want to be safe, you want the money for the infrastructure, but the biggest mistake is that they think they've just got another job, and so they think, oh great, I've got this big what happened to me was I landed this enormous contract when I left corporate, and I thought, oh fantastic, I've got this huge contract, and
off to the races,
awesome, here we go again, and there'll be another one, and there'll be another one, except there wasn't, because suddenly I'm a consultant. I'm no longer a figurehead of my industry, which I was in corporate. Suddenly I'm just a small business, and the biggest mistake I made from day one was that I did not decide precisely exactly what it is I stood for, what value proposition I offered, and stood from the mountaintops and sang it. And you know why? The first one...
Well, it hadn't occurred to you, I suppose.
First one was it hadn't occurred to me as to that I didn't know enough about marketing. I didn't know that your value proposition that you put forward must be an inch wide and a mile deep. The old principle that if you're marketing to everybody, you're marketing to nobody. I didn't know that. So I wanted to be everyone's friend, Biggest mistake number one, and then mistake number two was not being really crystal clear on what it is that I wanted to go to the market with. And you know what, that took a lot of courage and a lot of clarity, neither of which I'd really taken. I mean, the courage was there, but the clarity of what do I want to take to the market, what am I want to be known for, and that does take a lot of courage, because you've actually got to reject a lot of things to do that. So I have an analogy, like you're being dropped, it's like you're being dropped in the desert, and you have 360 degrees of choice, and you've got to pick 1 degree to walk in, because if you dither, you're gonna dry up and you're gonna die.
Keep moving forward.
You've got to pick your path, but not tie yourself so much to one path that you can't pivot. So you've got to pick a range of an area that you're going for. Be really clear, be decisive, and the people you speak to are backed. They back people with conviction. They want to help you. They want to support you. You are their gem in corporate. They love working with. They'd love to support you or have a friend who does. If they only knew what it is you wanted to target and you were clear on it. And so that's the second thing that is so important, I think, when you leave corporate. The third thing, obviously, is learn business skills like how do you quote, how do you close, how do you not go into scarcity when you don't close something in a hurry, or something comes back in October instead of June, and you go, oh gosh, how can I push this forward? And you're going to crush it and you're going to kill it. How do you look after your funnel? There's all of that.
So when I presume you had this sort of massive reality check.
Well, it's enormous.
And after that, what did you learn over however long time? What would you say some key things that you decided you needed to have in place? And this, I don't know whether you worked this out quickly or it's taken years, but if you were talking to somebody now who was making that move and you could give them a few takeaways, what would you say to them? What are the things they absolutely need to have in place? And how do they support themselves, even if they're quote unquote on their own, entrepreneur doing it from the start, bootstrapping it?
There's a magic formula to start with to de-risk your venture, and that is have a separate income. If you could work 3 days a week, even doing something you only questionably like, but you reframe it and you say, I'm so grateful that this work, XYZ, is de-risking and financing my venture into what I love. Because when you're not chasing the money, you really create some value. the key is to pursue what you love and what lights you up, what makes you feel good, because you're going to be extraordinary at it and your passion is contagious.
Yeah.
So if you can pursue that without saying, oh yeah, but I've got to monetize it really fast. I mean, that just chokes it.
Yeah.
So it's so important, first of all, to make sure that you can try and get that balance right. And most people don't do that. They go in uninformed optimism and they crash and burn. And also it allows them to be a bit more patient about what they're building.
Yeah.
Patience is such an important characteristic for entrepreneurs, because it's like planting a seed and it just germinates and you start pulling it out of the ground and saying, are you there yet?
Yeah.
Hurry up, have
Yeah.
you grown yet?
Yeah.
And you kill it. You absolutely kill it. Now, I mean, if anyone said, oh, I'll just try being an entrepreneur for a year, well, you're never going to succeed. It's a journey of, I wouldn't say 1,000 miles, but it's a journey of a number of years.
Yeah.
So get your foundations right. And by the foundations, I mean good systems. So make sure that you don't let the tax man start creeping up on you with a periodic payment crisis by having your accountant do your accounts 18 months in. Get signed up with Xero. Make sure you can run P&Ls out of Xero and you understand how to do that. It takes 90 seconds to run a P&L in Xero.
Right.
And get your quoting system set up in Xero.
Yeah.
So that and work out how are you going to quote the business you want to go after? How are you going to price yourself? How much margin do you need in that? So,
and this would be the same for someone who has a product too, right?
Yeah.
If there was, they're launching a product, for example,
Absolutely.
it would be the same thing. They need to know everything about their margins and their costs. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is when you use something like Xero, and maybe you use something like LivePlan as well, where you can do really good forecasting, and you don't need to be an accountant to do this. All you got to do is plug in your products, a few of your raw expenses, and see what it looks like in 12 months.
Yeah, right.
And it's a program called LivePlan that does it. It's really, really good.
So a few tools there.
A few tools like
what
that.
What about? I mean, Tim, like you can't afford staff, say,
No.
but what can you do to be supported somehow, whether that's in real life or virtually? Is it important? I think a lot of people must feel completely isolated and alone in this scary, oh my God, it's all me. How do you, what can you do about that?
One of the first things you can do to not feel isolated is obviously you've got to land a client fast. The amount of people I've come across,
Make a sale,
and I was one of them. I've got to wait till I get my website up, but they don't realise it's just another excuse. Well, I can't sell anything.
Yeah.
What a load of rubbish.
I haven't done my logo yet.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
It's a classic, isn't it?
It's such a load of rubbish because they're not buying your website; they're buying you.
Yeah.
You're representing the product
Yeah.
that they're buying, and they're connecting to your
Story.
your passion, what lights you up about it, why you believe in it. The story that you share is what converts them. They're not buying something from a supermarket. They're buying it from you. I think the next thing that's important for an entrepreneur starting out is to separate what they're passionate about and what they need to know. They're two different things. So whatever they're passionate about, whatever they're making.
You mean what they're good at or what they like the most? How do you mean?
They're probably good at what they like the most because they show the most interest in the thing that they're and they practice the most, the thing that they're excited about. But the problem is I found a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was one of them, would play around with certain areas that were not their experience.
Yeah.
A good example of this is social media. So yes, it's important to be across social media, of course it is. But if you spend all your time training yourself to become a social media expert, and you're only 60% as good as the professionals out there, and you fall flat on your face, suddenly your passion starts to dim for your business. You think, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And the thing that lit you up, you've lost sight of it, and you're actually being you're being knocked around by the fact that you're not performing in an area that is not your specialty. So you've got to be good enough to be across the different areas.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
But not become experts in them.
Yeah.
You know, focus on the strengths, on the stuff that fires you up.
But you've got to know enough about everything else to
You
know
do.
whether or not someone else is doing a good job or something.
Exactly.
Right? You've got to know enough about what they're doing to know, is it okay?
And your self-worth must be strong enough that you can say, sorry, I don't understand. Actually, that's not clear enough for me. Can you explain it a different way?
Yeah.
Because you've got to call the elephants in the room, because you have no wriggle room for failure here.
Yeah.
You're a small business, and I don't want to say be ruthless, but you have to be very direct. And if you don't get it, ask it a different way.
This is so different to corporate, where you can sort of melt into the background of a team and
Totally.
rely on other people to pick up the slack. Yeah, I guess that's a big shock for someone coming out of that.
Yeah, it is. And you've got to be courageous, really courageous, where in the past you could have just slipped away in the meeting and, well, maybe I'll let it go this time. Maybe it'll come up again in a month's time or whatever it might be. No, the time is now. It's right now. And you need to move fast and be decisive. So I'm working with someone at the moment who's just leaving corporate and going into entrepreneurship, and she's so strong in what she does in corporate, but I'm realizing that, she's having to go through a whole personality flip and re-examine herself, how she communicates, her brevity, her execution, all the areas she says she's not good at. Suddenly she's got to get up early in the morning with some new habits and restructure herself. You know, it's actually it's an awesome challenge in life, but it needs to be engaged with both hands.
Do you think that a very important thing for somebody making the move or considering making it corporate to entrepreneur is having a really clear reality check about what it's really going to involve?
I think it's like if you there's a fine balance. If you're presented a tightrope over the Niagara Falls and asked to walk it, you're probably going to have a little bit of nervousness. But if you've been doing it for 20 years and it's your core modality, it's just another walk in the park.
Yeah.
So getting familiar with the risk elements, the more you understand it, the less risky it feels. And then you've got more chance of having some conviction about what you do. That is so important. But the second thing is, we all know that, when I was going through this over a decade ago, people were worried about job security in their 50s.
Yeah.
People are now worried about their job security in late 30s and 40s. Yeah. So that in corporate, you are going to lose your job at some point. You know that you will probably live to 90 and you'll be unemployable past 35 or 40 or whatever it might be. So you better get on whilst your energy levels are high in working out how you're going to take control of your own destiny, how you're going to have fun and really feel good about what you're doing, and do that from the safety or in a process of understanding the risks, because it's inevitable you're going to go here. Really, it's inevitable. All you're really doing is starting up your own corporate from a small founder level, which is eventually going to scale and be extremely successful, we hope. So how about you get on and start owning the corporate ladder rather than being on the corporate ladder?